Welcome to lecture number 21. This is topic 3.6, the influence of revolutionary ideals, and our theme here is social structures. There's two learning objectives. The first one is going to deal with the impact at home, and then the second one is going to talk about the impact abroad. The first learning objective is explain the various ways the American Revolution affected society. The first key concept deals with debates with equality. During and after the American Revolution, an increased awareness of inequalities in society motivated some individuals and groups to call for the abolition of slavery and greater political democracy in the new state and national governments. After the revolution ends, slavery continues. It does not go away despite the revolution being based on ideas of equality. Northern states will begin to phase out slavery slowly, and by 1820, most of the northern states, especially in New England, are no longer going to have slavery within their boundaries. Slavery showed signs of weakening in the South, too, as tobacco prices started to fall, causing profits to decline as well. Soil nutrients were becoming exhausted, forcing farmers to move to new lands or expand their current operations. Therefore, the purchase of more enslaved people made less financial sense by 1790. In 1793, that's going to change with the invention of the cotton gin. It was a new machine that made it easier to remove the seeds from cotton crops to get it ready for the textile factories. It exponentially reduced the time of refining cotton, and now farmers begin to shift to that crop. There was a great demand for the crop from British textile factories, making the price favorable for the farmers. This increases the demand for enslaved people in the new United States. Despite the contributions of Black Americans to the Revolution, there was no path to equality set for them. Even in the northern states where emancipation would eventually be granted, there was no guarantee they'd ever receive equal citizenship rights. Despite Black Americans fighting in the Continental Army alongside white soldiers and being involved in the independence movement as early as the Boston Massacre. In the Boston Massacre, the first casualty was Crispus Attucks, who was half Black, half American Indian. Phyllis Wheatley, who is pictured on the right side, was an enslaved person who became a poet and was taught how to read and write by her enslavers. She wrote a lot of poems about equality, praising the Revolution, praising George Washington, talking about how slavery was a status that she would not choose to put on anyone else, and through her stanzas, held up a mirror to the rest of America. She showed them that while they were talking about equality in this revolution against Britain, they were still taking away liberty from a large group of people. 1/5 of the total population in the new states was enslaved. Wheatley's poems were published into a book. She is considered the first African-American published author. In terms of greater level of democracy, voting rights are going to be expanded across the states. Every state is going to write its own state constitution. They're going to set their own guidelines for who gets to vote. White males are going to have near universal suffrage despite property requirements being set in most states. The property requirements are going to be so low in most states that the majority of white males are going to be able to vote. In other instances, the property owning requirement is substituted with a tax-paying requirement to accommodate merchants. New Jersey is the only state which allows women to vote. They will allow them to vote from 1776 to 1807. The number of women who could vote through this provision was still low, since the property requirements still applied, and coverture laws still made it so that property for married women was held primarily by their husbands. Only a small amount of wealthy single widows were able to vote. The next concept is about Republican motherhood. In response to women's participation in the American Revolution, Enlightenment ideas, and women's appeal for expanded roles, an ideal of Republican motherhood gained popularity. It called on women to teach Republican values within the family and granted women a new importance in American political culture. Women, very much like enslaved people and Black Americans, contributed a lot to the Revolution. In the case of women, they took part in boycotts. They were part of groups like the Daughters of Liberty. Some impersonated soldiers and fought alongside the Continental Army. They maintained the colonial economy while men were away fighting, and yet they were not given equal rights at the end of the Revolution. In the new form of government, their consolation prize was this new concept of Republican motherhood. They were allowed to have a greater level of education given that they were going to be the ones to teach their sons Republican values. The logic was that their sons would grow up to be the next leaders of America, so they would benefit from a home in which the primary caregiver was educated in the principles of the Revolution. It's still a largely domestic role. There's no equality granted in these new state governments, and it's not by lack of trying. In fact, Abigail Adams had written a letter to her husband, John Adams, during the Revolutionary period, when he is a part of the group that's coming up with a new form of government. She explicitly requests to her husband, John, to remember the ladies and be more favorable to them than your ancestors. Remember, all men would be tyrants if they could. If particular care and attention is not paid to the ladies, we are determined to foment a rebellion, and will not hold ourselves bound by any laws in which we have no voice or representation. Her letter is critical in importance because it shows that women were petitioning for increased rights from the very beginning and framed their argument in similar terms as the Patriots framed their argument for independence. Sadly, her request is dismissed. At the same time in England, the writings of Mary Wollstonecraft are widely read and debated in the United States. Her book, Vindication of the Rights of Women, is widely read and pushed women for an expanded role in society for equal rights. In the United States, Judith Sargent Murray wrote the essay On the Equality of the Sexes in 1790, actually predating Wollstonecraft's Vindication of the Rights. The second learning objective is describe the global impact of the American Revolution. We'll see how it impacted the other countries abroad. The last key concept for today says the American Revolution and the ideal set forth in the Declaration of Independence reverberated in France, Haiti, and Latin America, inspiring future independence movements. What the key concept is saying is that the revolution in America started a domino effect. France's revolution began in 1789 over the discontent with taxes, the wars that they had been fighting, and the poor state of the economy. The revolution went through different phases and it included the beheading of King Louis XVI, a reign of terror, and ultimately an empire led by Napoleon. Haiti, a French colony in the Caribbean, had a revolution of its own. It followed the same Enlightenment ideals that the American Revolution followed, and it was led by Toussaint Louverture. It was the only successful revolution led by enslaved people, yet despite it being based on the same Enlightenment ideals, this was not something that the United States praised. It inspired a lot of fear in the United States, actually, especially in some southern states, because they feared that enslaved people in the United States would try to carry out a similar revolution. In 1821, Mexico overthrows Spain, and then finally in the mid-19th century, we have Simón Bolívar leading revolutions all across Latin America, overthrowing the remnants of the Spanish Empire. All right, here is your recap. Slavery continued to be practiced despite revolutionary ideals of equality in the United States. Voting rights expanded in the new republic. Each state had different requirements, though it was limited to white males. Women's role in Republican motherhood were still largely domestic, and finally, the American Revolution was the first of many around the world. France and Latin America followed right after. Thank you for watching. If you would like to watch the next lecture, you can click on the video link on the screen. And if you are looking for more practice to help you on the AP exam, you can visit apushslides.com. I wish you the very best in all of your studying and look forward to seeing you back on the next lecture.